All right, welcome back to this 1992 Subaru Sambar engine rebuild. I have bolted the last end cap in place, and it's important when you put this on that you get it flush with the rest of the block. So I snugged it down, give it a little tap on the side, and so it was felt nice and flush, and then bolted it down. That's torqued down. The next thing to do is a final check on the end play. And I was able to get a 3/1000 of an inch feeler gauge between the thrust bearing and the crankshaft. The tolerance is between 2/1000 and 8/1000 of an inch, so we're good there. Next thing to do is to push these rubber seals into the little void space here in either end of the main bearing cap. Doesn't really give you a lot of information on the manual other than to use sealant. So what I'm going to do, my thought process is I'm going to squeeze a bit of silicone down these holes and then tap these rubber seals in place. They're pretty firm, and it should hydraulic the silicone down into the bottom and then start to squeeze it back up and extrude out the top end. So that should be a good solid seal with silicone, which kind of goes along with what I found when I pulled it out, and the silicone that was in there, it did seem to be pretty much just full of silicone with the rubber seals in place. So that's what we're going to do. Push a bit of silicone in there. Hard to tell how much I'm getting in, but squeeze it in. A bit more in this one. And then I can put a little bit on the seal. Last thing you want to do is have this leak after you put the damn thing together. That would not be cool. So let's see if we can do this here. Push that in. And hopefully, it does feel like it's getting solid, so I suspect it's going to push some silicone. It is. It's pushing silicone up. That's great. That's what I was hoping for. Yeah, that should be good for that one. Get the other one here. I'm going to use a screwdriver just to push that down. Oh, actually, I can see it squeezing out inside the engine down below. Right down there, inside the engine. And also, in this crack out the side, it's squeezed out. So that's great. That is, that should be sealed quite nicely once that cures up. So that's great. So that should be the bottom end done up. The next thing for us to do is actually tip this on its end, and we're going to start installing the pistons. All right, moving on to the pistons and piston rings. I opened up one package already, and I threw the lower O-rings, oil rings on. But the upper rings, number 1 and number 2, in this particular kit that I got, it doesn't identify which ring is the upper and which ring is the lower of the number 1 and number 2. Further, I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to try and get this on camera. This ring here has got a profile. Let's see if you guys can see. It's not perfectly square. It's got a bit of a notch on it. So these are this is orientated one side or the other. I suspect it's up. Normally there's a little bit of writing on here. I think you can maybe see that. Yep. And this one has a bit of writing. So normally that would be facing upwards. So I suspect that's how it is. And I do think that this is the lower ring. This is number 1. I've actually contacted the supplier just to get some, I went online to try to find out, and I can't find it, anything with respect to that. So I'm waiting for a response back from him to tell me which one goes up and which one goes down. Because to be honest, when I took the old piston rings off, I don't remember them being different, and unfortunately, they're removed and they're gone. So I'm going to hold off on putting the piston rings on. But one thing you do have to do is actually check the gap on the piston rings when they're installed in the cylinders. I'm going to show you how to do that. Looking in the manual, one thing is all the ring gaps are orientated a certain way on the piston. We'll get to that when we install it. But more importantly, this is the end gap when you put the piston rings inside the cylinder. So for the top ring, this is a naturally aspirated engine, not supercharged. I've converted it from metric, but it's 6 to 12 thousandths of an inch end gap. The second ring is 6 to 12 thou, so the same. And then the oil rings are 4 to 23, quite a bit of a tolerance there. But that's what we're looking at. Okay, checking the end gap. I got my cylinder here. I'd carefully take my piston ring and just squeeze it together by hand and work it into the cylinder. You definitely do not want to break one of these piston rings because you can't buy one. You got to buy a whole kit. It'll take you forever. So slide it in. I use the piston to square it up. I'll push the piston in a ways so that it's sitting there square. I don't know if you can see the gap. Yeah, you can. So the tolerance is 6 to 12 thousandths of an inch. So I've got a 13 thou feeler gauge. Let's see if that fits. No, it doesn't fit. That's a good sign. Let's go down to a 12. It does look like a fairly big gap, to be honest, so I think it's probably going to be on the higher end. Yep, 12 fits. So that's right at the top end of the tolerance, so I'm happy with that. We'll try the other piston ring. Let's see how that one works. Let's see if I can get it so you can see the gap easier. There we go, get it in there. Square it up with the piston. Check my gap. 12 fits. Let's get my 13. Hopefully it doesn't. But it is what it is. If I've got a bit more of a gap, I'm gonna let it fly because I'm not going to be boring the cylinders out. And well, yeah, 13 fits as well. So I'm definitely a little bit past the tolerance on my my end gap. 14 doesn't, so yeah, it's 13. So it's 1,000th of an inch over. Not the end of the world. It is going to affect your compression a little bit, and it's going to potentially affect a little bit of oil consumption. But just to show you guys how you set your end gap. If it was too tight, you'd actually take you can just actually take a small jeweler's file and file the end so that you get that gap. Okay, so I got some information. The compression ring at the top ring, number 1 ring, is just the solid ring. And the next ring, which has got the bit of a profile in it, is the second ring. And the wording on the rings is facing up. So we're going to go to time lapse. I'm going to install all these piston rings on here. Now there is a tool to install them, to spread them open and put them over. I don't have one. I've always done it by hand, but you got to be really careful, especially with that number 2 ring, to get it all the way down into this groove. It's tight, so you don't want to break that ring. Take your time. Do not force it because these are very brittle. So we'll go with time lapse here. All right, I got all the piston rings on. No breaking. That's good news. The next thing to do is install the pistons. One thing I do is I take some vacuum line, little vacuum caps, rubber caps, and I stick them on the threads because you don't want to have that piston get pushed into the cylinder and hit the crank and damage it. Don't ask me why. Maybe I've done it before, damaged a crank. You only need to do something like that once. Anyway, I put little rubber stops on the threads, and that protects the crank. Next thing we gotta also do is make sure that the piston rings are orientated correctly before we push it in. So I'll try to capture this all in video. All right, so I've got the piston rings orientated. Looking from the arrow, the first top piston ring is here, the middle piston ring is here, and the oil ring is about here, the gaps. And then the second oil ring, I've actually put 180 degrees apart. So it doesn't specify that. I don't want to have them both in line, so I put it 180 apart. But they're all about 60 degrees apart. So next thing to do is I'm going to put some engine oil inside the cylinders, and I'm going to put some engine oil on the cylinder rings. I will compress them and then tap it in with the little rubber vacuum pieces on the studs so to not damage the crankshaft. All right, I've got my piston rings compressed. They're orientated the way I want them. One thing to make sure you note is, there you can see it there, is that arrow has got to point upwards towards the number one cylinder, not number one crankshaft. So I've got oil on the piston rings. I've put oil in the cylinder, so I'm going to slide it in, get it started like that, and I'll take the wooden end of a hammer, ball peen hammer, and I'll just tap it in. You could use whatever to tap it in, but don't use metal. Get this squared up. There we go. So I'm going to tap that in. My crankshaft is orientated so that I've got lots of room. The throws at the bottom. If there's any resistance to going in, stop, take it out, and recompress your piston rings. If you do not want to have a piston ring slightly hanging out and catching and snapping while you do this, so you got to be very careful. And there it is. The piston's inside. And now I just push it all the way down inside and get it to match up with the crankshaft. There, I put the camera on the other side so you can see when I tap this in. I haven't done it yet. I just got it started, so I can see the crank is right here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it much. The lighting not be that great, but I'm going to tap this in. It's going to go onto that journal right there. Pop these off. Get some assembly lube. I'll put it on the bearing cap, although there's still some left over from when we checked the bearing clearances. Make sure it goes in the correct way. There's only one. I have to get a flashlight here. There, I got a flashlight there. It's a little brighter. This is gonna go on like that. So slide that on. Again, I'm not going to torque these yet. I'm just going to snug them up. I'll torque them later. And there we go. Number one piston is installed. Very good. So we'll do time lapse here and get them all installed here. Okay, we got those all installed. No issues, went in quite nicely. Now we're going to torque the caps down. They are 17.5 foot-pounds or 210 inch-pounds. Gotta turn it to get the other ones down where I can reach them, but it's getting a bit tight with all the pistons in there. Come on, see if we can get them there. No, not quite. Let's turn this engine over. There we go. There we go. Tighten these up to Okay, those are all torqued down. One thing I wanted to also show you is there's actually a tolerance. I don't know if you can see, yeah, you can see how much that moves back and forth. There's a tolerance on that, which is 3 to 13 thousandths of an inch. So I've got a 10 thou feeler gauge, and I can't quite get it in there. I think it's about 9, which is great because you don't want to have your connector rods binding up on your crank. You need a bit of end float there. Yeah, 9 thou there, 9 thou there. See if I can quickly check the other ones here. 9. Just get 9. This one actually might be 10, I think. Let's just check that. No, can't get a 10. They're all 9 thou, so that's perfect. Well within tolerance. The next thing we're going to do is install a windage tray or a girdle. It basically ties your mains and your block together. It gives it some rigidity. I think it also helps keep oil from splashing around and hitting the crankshaft as it's rotating, which robs you of horsepower. So this is the windage tray. This is how it goes on. It basically bolts through the side here and also into the top main caps. But I also know that the oil pickup tube goes on top of these. So we have to actually put the front of the motor on with the oil pump, which is right here. I'm going to assemble that now. Another thing, way back when I took this motor apart, all the different bolts, you know, it's really hard to remember where everything goes. You bag everything, write it down. There's the windage tray bolts right there. So I'm going to clean these bolts up and the bolts that bolt the front of the oil pump together, and then we'll get going here. All right, I got the oil pump reassembled. I didn't bother to video that. It's pretty simple, really. But one thing to know is right here is where the oil goes from the oil pump into the engine, right there. So there's an O-ring for there. And there's also an O-ring on the oil pickup right there. There's this O-ring right there. It goes onto the oil pickup. So just remember to replace those O-rings when you assemble it. So we'll just set up the camera and we'll do that. All right, I got some silicone put around the face of the block, which will match up onto the oil pump. And then once that's bolted on, then we can do our windage tray. Okay, we got the oil pump on. One thing to note, there is, on the oil pump, there's 2 little flats that will line up with the crankshaft. There's a couple of flats machined on the crankshaft. So you might have to twist your crankshaft a little bit to get that cover to go on, slide over the oil pump. Now we're going to torque the bolts down. They're 5 foot-pounds or 60 inch-pounds. So we'll go around and do that. Doesn't take much. Round again, so check, yeah, they're good. All right, oil pump's on. Next thing we'll do is we'll put the oil pickup and windage tray on. All right, back to an overhead shot of the motor. We're gonna put the windage tray on. This being the front of the motor where the oil pump is. This just sits over top like this. And put your bolts on. You want to do everything except for these 2 because the oil pickup is on those. So we'll just get these all started. It's actually in the book, they call this a stiffener plate, which I can understand why. Going to the oil pickup now. I'm going to install my new O-ring on here. And that will just go into place like that. Looks like this tube's got a little bit of tension on it, so I'm just going to push it over to the side a little bit to get the holes to line up. No big deal. Now, nowhere in the book can I find a torque spec on these. They're the same size bolt as the oil cover, so I'm going to go 60 inch-pounds on the outer ones, and then I'll have to look up what the inside ones are here, just going by the size of the bolt. But you know, I rebuilt a lot of engines in my time, and I will say this does seem not very tight. And this isn't an area I want a bolt to come loose, so I may actually go a little bit more than this. I think I'm going to put it up to 90 inch-pounds. Just does not feel tight enough to me. Yeah, it's a little better. I just realized something. I can get at these 3 bolts. I can't get at that bolt. So I may actually have to remove the oil pickup, torque all 4 of these down, and then do that. So I'm going to pause it here and we'll do that. All right, I'm going with 200 inch-pounds on these larger bolts here for the mains. And I'll put my pickup tube back in, got my O-ring in place. And go back to 90 inch-pounds on these ones. There we have it. Our bottom end's bolted together, and we're at the point now where we can put the oil pan on. But I think that's going to be it for today. I've really got to get ready to pack to head out here, leaving early tomorrow morning. So we'll leave it at that. You guys have now seen how to basically reassemble the block, all the rotating assembly. And yeah, I'm gone for 2 weeks. When I get back, we'll see if we can get this thing fully assembled. So any questions or comments, please leave it behind on the section here below. And if you like this, give me a thumbs up. Anyone want to subscribe to me? Hey, much appreciated. Thanks a lot. We'll see you guys in a few weeks.